Hello and welcome to the Comedian's Outlook. I'm Luke Anthony and this is a podcast where I speak to fellow comedians about their world of comedy. This week I'm speaking to fellow writer and comedian Dan Farmer. He is a great friend of mine and so many people in the Cambridge scene. He is co-curator of the Cambridge Fringe Festival with Ali Warwood and just an awesome guy to chat to be honest. He knows so much about comedy, the industry, the engineering of it, and this episode is such a good one for anyone who wants to learn more about the depths of comedy and how to do it. Let's get straight into it, shall we? Welcome to the show, Dan Farmer. Because when I was growing up, I used to speak before I did. You know, I'd say that, I can't wait to do this thing. I can't wait to do this. This is a great idea. I'm going to tell everyone about the idea before I've done the idea.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, you're just setting yourself up for failure a bit because then everyone has that expectation and then in 6 months' time people ask you how that's going. You're like, oh no, it's a rubbish idea.
I've had numerous instances where I have said that I'm going to do something, been very taken with the idea, and then a while later it hasn't come to fruition. And there's a lot of things that, like looking back, I either wasn't qualified to do and I'd overshot.
Sort of punching above your weight.
Yeah, I was punching above my weight, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because you need to work at the outside of your capabilities in order to grow in terms of skill. But there were things such as years ago I tried writing a novel. Yeah. And I tried writing several sequentially. And what I tend to find was I would write the first draft really fluidly and it would all come together. And within about 3 months, it would be done, and that would be the first draft. Of course, it's the first draft, so it was shit.
Yeah,
that's the point of the first draft. It's just to have some clay in which to mould.
Yeah.
But then I would get over-ambitious with what I wanted to mould it into and demand of myself that come the end of the second draft, that it would be next to flawless. But I lacked the understanding of narrative structure, like in terms of like 3 acts or 5 acts, how those acts are meant to grow, what a beat actually is in terms of conflict, the purpose of dialogue. And I got too caught up in the idea of the theme rather than the actual interactions between the characters and how that drives the story, because it's the characters that drive the story, not the theme. But I got it the other way around. So I would get extremely frustrated and then fuck it off and then go and do something else. Out of frustration, again, do really well initially, but when it came to getting it good, I was thinking about all the stuff I've said I was going to do this, I've said it's going to be this good, and people ask me questions, and then when it's not, again, I fuck it off. So it constantly seemed to be that these big projects I was taking on, so there was 3 novels that I can think of that come to mind, the ideas of which I all like still, but I can't go back to them because I've ruined it for myself. There was a comic book series I wrote, a 6-issue comic book series, which I've still got the scripts and I still want to do something with. Yeah. But again, looking back, I can see that it's flawed narratively, but again, that was really driven by the characters and the things. It was about a guy who every time he eats bacon has cryptic visions of the future, but they always seem to involve someone vomiting on him or him shitting his pants. But then he gets involved with various criminal gangs who are extorting him, and he travels into the future because he accidentally eats a sausage, and there's a terrorist and there's a factory that's extorting other people. It's got a lot of things that I really think's a cool idea, but again, it's flawed, and it kind of, that was meant to be a comic book series. We got a guy to do the drawing, then his mum fucking died, selfish bitch, and then that ruined it for us, and then it was a case of trying to find someone else. But of course, comic book artists, if they draw a page for a comic book, that's a day, 2 days work for a page.
Just a page.
And then you got to think, you got to pay them for that day. That's a day's work. They can't be doing something else whilst they're doing that, or they're doing it in and around things, but then that stretches it out over months. And I haven't got the money to be paying for someone's livelihood. So again, like, I think that's why comedy's so good, in that you can have an idea and all it requires is a microphone and some people to listen to it.
It's true. Yeah, you can literally speak about what's in your mind and what you're feeling.
Yeah,
and it's a live reaction to what you're thinking or feeling.
You get that immediate feedback, and if it's good, sometimes you can just go, oh, that was it. That's all I needed it to be. I just needed to say it the once and it's done and I can move on. I'm great. But other times you go, right, that was exactly the response I want. I'll keep doing this ad infinitum, or that wasn't quite the response I want, but at least I now got an idea of where it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're looking at a 100,000 word manuscript and you're like, well, I think this works, and then you've got to give it to someone else and say, tell me which of these 300 pages work and which don't. I mean, you're asking a lot of someone else who, again, isn't necessarily knowledgeable on the subject. They're just going by gut instinct, and taste is subjective. But with comedy, you're looking for one single response, and if you get that response, you know it works. If you don't, you've got a reasonable understanding that it doesn't, because of course sometimes, again, taste is subjective and people just aren't going to laugh at that, or the room's wrong or something. But you generally know if someone's not laughing or smiling, it's flawed. Yeah. And I like that immediate feedback that comedy offers you.
So do you think that the comic book would be good in like a sitcom sort of format, or?
Yeah, well, the worst thing about it is that it was written in that format, and then we had to try to rejig some of the things. It was written in full script, and then we had to try and rejig it so it would work on a page, which again means it's flawed in the sense of turning pages. It could work as a novel because it was written to be visual. Okay, so you can imagine there's not a lot of internal stuff going on, so you can add to it, but it's quite a fast-paced thing. Yeah. But again, if you're going to be doing it as a one long continuum, the 6 chapters in which it's written in need to flow into a 5-act structure, which isn't too hard. But again, this was written 4 years ago, and I've learned a lot more since then. So sort of going back into it, it would be a lot of cutting and pasting, and I kind of want to do other stuff. Yeah. You know?
So it's almost like that outlet that's already been sort of exhausted in that sense. So in terms of, when you've got this inspiration to do something, if you got that and you go on stage and you talk about the first time you do it and it gets a good reaction, it's the best feeling in the world.
In a way, I've kind of, that feeling, that immediate sort of like, yes, this is amazing, I don't get anymore. Okay. But I don't get that with anything.
Okay.
So
you become a cynic of life.
It's just like, it's fleeting. And there is, again, with comedy, there's so many things that can affect it on the night. Like you could come off the back of someone who's done an amazing job and warm the crowd up for you. Yeah. And you're just riding that energy. Yeah. And it's a group effort in that sense. It's not just you and what you're doing then, it's the group effort of everything. But also sometimes it's because you've interacted with people in a certain way and you've bought favour. Yeah. Which again is something that you've done, but it's not necessarily the strength of the material. So there's so many other factors that kind of play into it. But also the stuff that works is never the stuff I'm focusing on. It's the stuff that doesn't work. The stuff that works is great, brilliant, that works. But how do I get this bit to work? So I kind of never really allow myself to
enjoy it
because I'm focusing on the stuff that doesn't. And again, I probably piss quite a few people off because when I finish, I'm always going like, right, so what about this bit? Clearly focusing on the bit that was slightly contentious or something. It's like, how can I make that work? And but if you don't focus on those areas, there's no point in focusing on the stuff you're good at if you want to grow. Like you can develop the stuff you're good at and learn from it, but you need to be focusing on the stuff you're bad at and applying what you've learned when you got good at the other stuff.
So you've obviously been like writing for a lot longer than you've done comedy. When did you transition into stand-up?
That would be about 3 years ago. But the only reason for the writing was because there wasn't an avenue to do stand-up. The art form of stand-up has always interested me ever since I was probably about 8-9 years old. No, but a little bit older than that. I would have been at the first year of secondary school was the first time I saw a lot of stand-up in like a short space of time. My dad had moved to Stroud from Gloucester. I haven't lived in March all my life. I used to live over in Gloucester. He moved to Stroud. I had to spend weekends with him. And the person he was living with had a bunch of stand-up DVDs. It was things like Roy Chubby Brown, Lee Evans, Jethro. So it was that club circuit, bawdy comedy, but I'd never seen anything like that before. And my dad is horribly racist, So all of those kind of jokes, like I grew up with that, and it was one of those things where I was young. I didn't really. I knew that it was wrong, but also I did. The jokes were funny, and not all of the stuff they do is racist. Like there's a really good parrot joke by Roy Chubby Brown, or it's about a budgie, really long, but it's really good, really well delivered. Lee Evans is a lot of like my wife kind of stuff, and running around and clowning.
Very physical.
But again, when you're 11 years old, seeing a grown man running around and acting like a child is hilarious.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was captured with that, and then around, well, it must have been about probably about 10 years ago, when Mock the Week started getting big.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you had that big wave of stand-up coming through, and a lot of panel shows where it was a lot of comedians basically doing their routines. That kind of reignited that again. And I really wanted to go out and do something. I actually went down to London to do some stand-up. Got a train ticket, got it wasn't a hotel, it was a hostel for the night. Went to the club, only to discover that it was closed because of the London riots.
Oh, gosh.
And there was no one rioting. I'm looking around and going, this is lovely, it's really nice and peaceful. I wasn't even aware there were riots going on, but apparently there were riots, which meant that the club owner didn't want to go out in case he got stabbed. So I didn't get to do any comedy. So I came back, and then
How old were you then when that happened?
I would have been mid-20s.
Right.
Probably about 24.
Yeah.
25. So I had to wait a few more years for the scene in Cambridge to start, with like First Laughs had to start. Actually, I didn't know about First Laughs before I found out about an open mic in Peterborough. I started doing it at an open mic in Peterborough, and within a few months of me starting that, First Laughs had started up and someone told me about it. But I had to wait for these things to exist and be local to me before I could do anything.
Yeah, that's true.
So in the meantime, I was doing all this other stuff and writing and focusing on it. But because it was a substitute for what I really wanted to do, again, I think that was part of the reason I got so disenfranchised so quickly with things. I
mean, I find that I think I was writing since a very young age. Like the first gig I ever did, I was like really, really young. And then I just sort of put it to bed myself. But I think a lot of comedians start out as writers and then want to sort of try it out. It's very hard to get something you've written to be acted out by other people, or to be created by other people, or the funding and the cost of all those things, and like just the logistics. Whereas if you just turn up in normal clothes and get onto a stage and with the microphone, you can sort of just pretty much do anything you want.
Yeah.
And the ball is in your court. And I guess something you can't always transfer the content you've created, but you can at least speak about the things you find funny, at least.
It has its limitations, but so does every art form. And it's having those limitations that provokes the creativity, because immediately you're presented with a problem that you can solve.
Yeah.
Whereas if you sit down and go, I'm going to write some comedy, but you have no idea what you're going to write about, it's a lot harder than being inspired by something and then sitting down and writing about a thing and your feelings on it. So, yeah, although you can't go up and do, or very difficult to go up and do a multi-person sketch or something that is extremely visual because it requires like props and movement and things, you can most of the time come up with a way of presenting the idea, at least.
Yeah, that's true.
But there are things like, you remember Spaced, the episode with the mimed gunfight?
Yes, okay.
That was a piece of stand-up that Simon Pegg tried to get to work for years.
Oh, really?
And it never really took off, but it was always an idea that he really liked and had in the back of his head. So when he had this episode of Spaced, it seemed to fit perfectly, so they tried it and it worked a lot better, and it's now one of the most recognisable things of that show.
Yeah.
So yeah, it doesn't always work, but you have to try it. And I think there's a lot that works. It's quite a flexible medium in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but with the writing that you've done, do you think that you would just try your luck and maybe try and get it like commissioned and solicited, or?
No, not at this point.
Not at this point.
I mean, there is another book I'm writing at the minute, but again, that's something I am genuinely interested in. And if I can finish it, and again, I'm not putting pressure on myself to do so, but if it gets finished and it's of a quality I like, I'll probably just attempt to self-publish it and
Oh, okay. Yeah, just put a bit of funding into it, print some copies.
Which, again, is something I could probably... I think I'll probably just go to gigs and stuff, and if people are interested, I can just give them a link to an ebook, and they can pay a couple of quid towards it. It's
the least amount of work possible.
Yeah, but I also don't want to be badgering people with that, because it's quite a commitment of time sitting down to read something like that, and if people aren't genuinely interested in it, or they're just feigning interest because you've said you've done something.
Yeah, I see. I see. So you I mean, I've obviously seen you perform quite a lot, but I've seen you perform like 3 years into you doing stand up. Solid stand up. So I just wonder, when you first started, what was your material like, and what did you speak about?
My very first one was about a guy I saw returning condoms to Boots.
Okay.
And I saw it happen. I went to go to check the open mic out like the night before, and there was a guy performing who was doing his first time there as well. I'm not going to say who it is because he's still out and about.
Yeah.
But I'm much better than Harrison Salter. No, what it was, I saw Harrison. I've told Harrison this as well, so he knows. I saw his very first gig, and it was one of those things where I was watching and he was doing some stuff, and I kind of thought, yeah, I can do this. I can get up. I've got some ideas. I can do this, and I can probably do it okay. So the following week I did, and but the day after I saw Harrison, I saw this guy returning condoms from into Boots. I'm like, why would you need to return condoms? What has happened in this guy's life that means he no longer needs to wrap his cock when he's having sex? And I ended up writing 15 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Like, just off the bat on this thing and going off on all these different tangents.
Like scenarios of...
Yeah, little scenarios of why, and for a first time, it was quite good. If I don't say so myself.
We need some witnesses for this.
I've got video of it.
You got a video?
I've got video of it. And, like, for a first time, and that's what you have to take into consideration, I'm very nervous. I don't really know, like, how to present myself when I'm up there, how to make eye contact and things like that, which again sounds simple, but when you're in the moment it becomes a lot more difficult to maintain that eye contact. But yeah, it went really well, and it gave me the confidence to go up, and I didn't bomb until about my 5th time. And I was doing new material every time. Sometimes were a bit of a struggle, some jokes didn't land, but enough did to encourage me. But around the 5th time I tried to do something I read about Andrew Wakefield, who was like the doctor who started the whole measles vaccines cause autism thing. And the problem was I didn't make it funny enough or silly enough. I was just angry.
I see.
Which for some comics, that seems fine, because when they're angry it comes across as funny. But apparently I just came across as correct.
like a rally, like TED talk
it turned into a TED talk, and people, instead of laughing, were just nodding and going, yeah, he's right. I was like, this is not the response I want, but it's nice to be validated. So that was the first time I kind of really sort of like came off stage going, I fucked up here, I've missed a trick. And then the next time I kind of really felt like that was actually the first time I met Jason Stamp.
Okay, yeah, lovely guy. Been on the podcast.
Yeah, he ran a night in St. Neots, and it was the second one of them, I think. And I went up and I was doing something about my son, about finding out he was disabled and stuff. And there's it's quite a sad story, finding out that your son's like got severe epilepsy and he's never going to have the life of an average child. But it was quite funny in that when we were in ICU, he diarrheaed all over me, and I had to travel back from Leicester to March wearing women's trousers. So, but in order to get to that point, you've got to tell like part of the sad story. But again, instead of just starting off with some funny stuff to get you in and buy you favour, I went straight into the sad stuff. Which, again, is a comedy night. It's not an Edinburgh show. It's not 45 minutes into your Edinburgh show where you're crying about your dead fucking dad. I'd love it if my dad was dead. Oh no, he's a cunt. The world would be a lot better off without him. But
That's libelous.
Fucking Richard Farmer is a cunt. There we go. It's, yeah. Like, what the fuck was I saying prior to that?
If you've been affected by any of the issues discussed today on this podcast, you can get in contact with...
He's my fucking dad. Say what I want.
It would just be him.
Yeah, exactly. And he doesn't own technology. He's terrified of it.
So you basically you went into the realization that your son had disabilities.
Talking about that again, like the people are immediately interested. But interest isn't what you're going for. It's not a lecture.
You never quite get up to speed with what you're doing.
Yeah, and when you're talking about something that a lot of people haven't got experience of or have got indirect experience of, you can create a lot of tension, which isn't a bad thing because you need the tension to create the release.
Yeah.
But if you're not creating the release, people just feel sad for you. And again, there's a strength to that because you can use that and you can twist that and. Really, comedy is about manipulating those expectations and those emotions, leading someone in one direction only to then take them in another quickly and create laughter as a result of the immediate surprise. But again, I was at a point where I wasn't doing that. And Jason was really lovely and said some nice things. And actually that same night was the first night I met Chris Norton Walker.
Oh, wow.
And Chris has been wonderful to me. And in fact, this if it wasn't for Chris, I wouldn't be still doing comedy, I don't think.
He's an amazing guy. I've had him on the podcast too, and he's just full of so much wisdom and he's so supportive. Yeah. And anytime you're feeling like rubbish about what you've just done, he'll find a way of like almost sugarcoating it, but then telling you how you can make it better. He doesn't just say, "Oh, it's fine, you're going to be fine." It's more that this is how you can make it fine.
Well, what happened was I saw Chris, and he was brilliant. He absolutely destroyed what he was doing. And it was one of those nights where he was just on all cylinders, just having a go at everyone, taking the piss out of the barmaid, taking the piss out of the audience, taking the piss out of the other acts. The night was fucked in the sense that it was like the room is split into three sections. In the first room you had comedy, in the next section you had football, and in the section after that you had a pool tournament, and you could hear everything that was going on. Terrible venue for comedy, but he made it work. It was absolutely fantastic. And I said to him, look, I'm organising a night in March. I want to set up a comedy night there because I thought, well, if there's not places for me to go to comedians, I'll bring them to me. Mm-hmm. So he's like, yeah, sure, headline it. So I found a place that would allow us to use the room on a Monday night completely to ourselves. Would allow me to tick it on the door, would advertise it to their clientele. They had quite a... it's basically a local pub, so the clientele were always regular, but they were quite supportive of those things that went on. They loved music nights. A comedy night would be something different. They thought they could sell it, so it looked really good. And the week before it was going to happen, my wife left me.
Oh gosh.
So I had now the fear of losing my house because I couldn't get all Joseph's benefit money and everything sorted. It was an unreasonable fear because like he's entitled to all the stuff he's entitled to regardless of who's living with him. Yeah. He was always going to be looked after and I'm his carer, so by proxy everything would have been fine. My daughter was living with me, but of course now I'm thinking like I've got a 2-year-old who I now need to look after by myself, and how am I going to manage this? And I've got this comment and I don't want to let people down, and I panicked and I didn't know what to do, and I contacted Chris and I said, look, I don't know what to do. Oh, and other acts had pulled out. That was the other thing.
I see, yeah.
So it was just down to like 3 of us. I was like, this has happened. I don't know what to do. I'm not in a state to fix it. He goes, leave it with me. And he contacted Ali Warwood.
Yeah.
He contacted Jason. He contacted a girl called Charlotte, who's no longer a comedian, but she does help with the Fringe. She does some of the volunteering and a lot of the social media for the Cambridge Fringe. Nessie Ward.
Yeah.
Put me in contact with. Joss Masson, who was the guy who set up First Laughs. So he basically put me in contact with every single person in Cambridge who ran a night and was of any significance, and said, here's your lineup, put them on. So I put them on. He goes, you MC. I was like, I can't MC. So I just did like, this is the next act, brought them on, and just as a general host. But I couldn't be funny that night. But I met a lot of people who I'm still in contact with now. Of course, Ali I now organise the Fringe with. Chris, I'll book at any opportunity, as with Jason. Nessie I adore, she's lovely. But that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't reached out to Chris.
Yeah,
and he had given me all this stuff and then given me these other avenues to explore later on when I was back in a fit state of mind to do so. So yeah, I feel like I owe a lot to Chris.
I'm sure he wouldn't feel the same though. I'm sure he'd just say we're friends. That's what friends do.
That's the sort of person Chris is though. Like
Yeah.
I could have done that and gone to someone else and not had the same result. I was just fortunate to have met Chris at the time I met him, to have booked him, and for him to have stepped up and done that.
So I didn't know that there was all this history to sort of like your friendship that you have with him, and every time you see him, you know, wherever he is, you always spend a couple of hours just talking. You know, it's one of those.
Yeah, I've got
friendships that's.
I've got a lot of time for him.
Yeah.
And there are like numerous instances, and again, Chris is like this with a lot of people, but like you can go after it and go, right, time to go home, and then you can stand in a car park for 2 hours talking to him.
Yeah.
And that's happened more than one occasion. And it's great. I just love the fact that it's there and I've got that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, like, and with Ali, like, the Fringe wasn't my idea. The Fringe was her idea. And the initial version of it fell through.
Oh, okay.
But she wanted to carry on with it. And she came to me and said, look, would you be willing to help with this? And yeah, we've done 2 years of what I thought was a really, really good festival.
And it's really, really popular as well. Let's talk a little bit about that. So you first came about when Ali wanted to set it up, and you, like you say, it fell through. But
yeah, I can't remember exactly why it fell through. It didn't come together for whatever reason. So later on, she had the idea of doing it. She asked me. She asked Joe Tennant. I think she might have asked a couple of other people, but me and Joe agreed to settle in and help. And then we set about pulling a festival out of our ass, getting the venues, agreeing to that, setting a price that was affordable to the comedians whilst not absolutely bankrupting us, because like neither of us have got money that we can just pour into a festival and lose.
Yeah.
We had to break even for it. But yeah, the first year was a lot of work, a lot of stress. We got everything together because we had to get imagery designed and everything, and work out the logistics of how the stuff would run and how many volunteers we would need to get people in and out in a good time. So there was a lot of stuff that we had no idea how to do. Just from running a normal night, we had to kind of expand that into a full day's worth of comedy. And we estimated it pretty well, but there did need to be some changes on the fly. The second year, we had a lot to learn from the previous year, and we applied that, and I feel the second year went very, very smoothly. The issues that came up in the second year were not caused by us. They were caused by the venue.
Okay.
One venue in particular, which couldn't be foreseen. So we had to adapt on the fly, which, like, there was one act who suffered a bit as a result of that, but like I said, it couldn't be helped.
I was there at the time. I think I was one of those I had to cover.
Yes,
on that showcase. But
it wasn't great. But again, things like that will happen when you're running a big event like that. But yeah, like, unfortunately, the second year we lost Joe halfway through.
Yes,
he had to go back to America. So, like, he was a huge part of that, getting everything set up, and get like all of the organisation, because he's a doctor. He's a doctor of psychology. He's very well organised. He runs big projects in his work all the time. So this was just a case of bringing that across and just showing us how to do it properly.
Okay. So he's he's been on the podcast as well, but we miss him so much in Cambridge. Like,
he's a wonderful person.
Yeah, and he's always there. Like, whenever anyone needs any cover, I think he covered one of my nights one point. He's covered things for Nessie. He's always there to help at any point.
Joe was one of the acts who did Endurance, which was a night I ran a little while back. It was like a competitive comedy night. It was basically like an MC boot camp. So it was 4 rounds. First was a type 5. Second was improv.
Yeah.
Third was audience interaction, and the fourth was fielding heckles. Which it was a night which all the acts that did it loved it. But it was on a Monday night at the Blue Moon. We just weren't getting the audience numbers in. And when I had to make some cuts just to save a little bit of money for some stuff, it was a night that was easy to get rid of. But one of the other reasons I got rid of it is so many people would pull out
I see, yeah.
Because it wasn't just an act turning up and doing his 5 minutes and then going home. It was a 2-hour commitment where you got to go up 4 times.
Yeah.
But it wasn't 4 times where you're just doing your material. It put you in some uncomfortable positions. So some acts who hadn't done it before seemed really excited when they first heard about it and then would pull out. Or they would just go, oh, it's a Monday. Oh, I can't be fucking bothered. I'll just say I'm ill.
Yeah.
It's like, I know there's not that much illness going around. So when 3 acts are pulling out on the night because they've all got diarrhea, it's like, well, unless you've all been fucking each other. So I would have to call Joe. I had to call Joe and I had to call Bim, Jamie, Rob Knighton and Nessie Ward and Charlie Stokes. They were the people I always ended up calling.
Yeah.
And of course Bim's now back in Canada, Joe's back in America, and that both happened fairly quickly with one another, which is another reason why I just went, well, if I've only got... Oh, and Gabriel Bowker, he was always being called on as well. Guy. But when it was just Gabe who I could call, it's like, well, I'm not going to get him to do the work of 4 people, so I'm going to fuck this night off.
I need to get Gabe on the podcast. Actually, there's so much we could talk about him. Actually, we should just get a panel full of like comedians just to talk about Gabe's like behaviour.
Oh, Gabe!
He's a beautiful person.
He is. He's absolutely wonderful. But I can't help but bully him.
It's got one of those faces, isn't it?
It's not that. It's just sometimes he says or does something, and I'm like, I can't. You must know better. And I can't help but and I hope he understands that I'm just doing it for fun. If there was any malice, like if he felt any upset, he should just say outright, and I would stop.
If you're a comedian, you should be able to understand that this is banter and
yeah, I hope. But sometimes he's come to me. It's like, are you genuinely pissed off at me? It's like, of course I'm not. don't be upset.
But that's another thing though, because I often do that fake angry thing with people. But because like a lot of comedians are the most insecure people in the world, they genuinely take it to heart and think that they've really offended you or hurt you.
Yeah,
and I just find it amusing. I find it's a bit manipulative actually, but I kind of find it interesting to see how far you can push someone before they start feeling too guilty, because they've got mental health issues like 90% of comedians.
Yeah, well, it's 90% of people, isn't it?
Yeah, now it's fashionable now.
Well, it's better that you can talk about it than being forced to bottle it up. But yeah, like very often comedians will, if I'm running a night, I'll get a message and say, look, I just can't perform tonight. Yeah. Something has happened and I'm not in the right state of mind. And as I said, like with me and that whole thing where Chris had to bail me out, like any time that happens, I am like, right, you have to look after yourself. Comedy is not going anywhere, and if anything, it is superfluous to the running of a country. Yeah. If everything happened tomorrow, like it all died and everything went wrong, the last thing anyone would be going is, oh, where's the nearest comedy night? The only people who would be saying that are people who get paid to do it.
Yeah, that's true.
All the other infrastructure is far more important. So get your shit in order, get your health together, look after yourself, because also comedy's meant to be fun. Yeah, and if you are up there and you are not having fun, you're not doing yourself any favours, and the audience can tell.
You see through it, can't they?
And actually, like the other week, I shouldn't have performed. The last Relevant, I should not have performed. But the reason for me not performing is fucking stupid. My phone broke.
Okay.
That was it. It broke, and all I needed to do was contact Tesco for a replacement, because it was in the 30-day replacement period.
Oh, okay.
But I think I'm addicted to the fucking thing at this point. I think I have a physiological addiction, because I had heart palpitations, I was twitchy, I was sweating. It was genuine cold turkey. And I went up and I addressed it and I tried to have a bit of fun with it. But I was very much in my own head and not focusing on the reactions of the others and trying to play off the crowd.
Okay.
And I was just thinking about the words I was saying. And getting them out in the right order, which I still fucked up because I shouldn't have been up there. And again, that is not that. Well, that clearly is someone who is mentally ill, because a phone breaking fucked their weekend up, and that shouldn't happen. But yeah, at the same time, like I should just be a better fucking human being, shouldn't I? That should not be a thing.
Well, every issue is an important issue now. But just bring it back to the Fringe slightly, and people like Joe like helped out a lot. One of the things I'd really like to say about like the Cambridge Fringe, which is different to other fringes like Edinburgh and other ones and everything, is that it's not there to benefit the organisers. Like a lot of fringes around the country are there to just look after the pocket of the people who organise it.
That was very important to me in the setting up of it. When we first did it, I was very much of the mind that it should have been a non-profit organisation, because as soon as you start trying to take a paycheck on it, you can compromise the integrity of the product. Not necessarily, but in an event that isn't a community event that is meant to be free entertainment for other people, as soon as you start adding your own expense into it, and thinking about how much you can earn, you can start making cuts in order to make sure you earn more.
Yeah.
I want to avoid shareholders at all costs, because I disagree with the concept of shareholders. I believe the product should sell itself, and that the value that the product brings in should just be based on the sales of the product. If it's not good enough to generate more money, because also once you get other people investing, then you're accountable to them, and it should be you are accountable to the people who it's for. It should be for the comedians and for the audience. Those are the people you should be accountable to, not someone who's giving you some money.
Yeah, that's true.
So it was very, very important to me that it wasn't for my benefit, it was for the benefit of the audience. However, now 2 years in, I completely changed my mind. It is a lot of work, and I would quite like to get paid for it next year. But if I don't, then it's fine.
No, but I think the issue there is that I think it's absolutely fine to come out maybe with a break even or make a small profit. But I think it's the cost, like going up to Edinburgh cost a minimum of like $5,000 just before you've even got up there and tried to succeed for a month. Do you know what I mean? It's that unfair cost to comedians and audience members.
Yeah, when it costs you thousands. I know someone who put on a play. It was a 10-day run, and it cost them £2,000 just to hire the venue.
Yeah.
Let me just quickly do the maths. It was did we charge 25 per slot? So 250 quid that would cost if you did it at the Fringe.
Yeah.
It's significantly cheaper. Like, we're not even a 10-day festival. I'm just saying, if we were, it would be around 10% of the cost of doing it in Edinburgh. But I don't know enough about the economics of Edinburgh to fully comment on it. But that's one of the reasons I don't, besides like having parental responsibilities during the time in which Edinburgh's on, the sheer cost of going, to me doesn't seem worth it. I would much rather build something locally and really put that attention there than having this thing that really just exists to feed the industry.
That's true. He is there for that. I mean, I know people like Rich Wilson, who's a friend of mine, a comedian as well. It's very good. It's like if you're getting paid to be in Edinburgh, it's amazing because you're getting all the right reviews, you're getting all the right people in watching you, and you're not there to lose. You're there to win because you've already been paid to do it, and so that once you get to that point, I think it's great because it's just another platform to sell tickets for other shows.
It would just be better, I believe. And there's a lot more small festivals popping up. It would just be better for acts in general to have more ways of building up that success prior to getting to Edinburgh, rather than banking it all on Edinburgh once a year and racking up 15 grand's worth of debt year on year on year with no guarantee it's going to pay off. It would just be nicer to have more places where you can build it, and that is happening. There are a lot more smaller festivals popping up that are a lot more affordable, that allow people to grow their fan base and not necessarily even go to Edinburgh.
Yeah, I mean, the Chris Norton Walker, for example, he has his great show called Unexpected Item in the Gagging Area, and he's taken it to quite a few fringes, not Edinburgh Fringe, but he's previewed it in many different places, and it's really worked for him because it's
a good show too.
Yeah, it's very.
It would work in Edinburgh, but he doesn't need to take it there, and I don't think, in an ideal world, that anyone should need to go to Edinburgh.
No.
It should just be something that would be nice to do. It shouldn't be an essential thing. In the same way that performing in London on the open mic circuit should not be an essential way for a comedian to gain success. Your reputation should be able to precede you, and you should be able to build up something across the country. Like Stuart Lee's model is the one I admire the most. I know he had the perfect opportunity when he had Comedy Vehicle on the TV, so he could do a year's worth of touring and then condense it into a TV series, and then do another year of touring and condense that into a TV series. But his idea that he only needs about 2,000 people to turn up to his shows a year, and for each of them to give him like 10, 15 quid.
Yeah.
I might have lowballed those figures a bit, but again, that's all he needs to survive year on year, and he's getting more than that at the moment.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you sort of break those economics down to most people, 2,000 people giving you £10 a year, that's £20,000. That is above minimum wage.
Yeah, that's that
for an annual salary. Then you've got to take your tax out. But you have to take your tax out of your salary estimates anyway. If you're on 15 grand a year, that's before tax.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're taxed 20% on that.
Of course, then you've got to factor in all the driving and everything, so it's not 20 grand, but you can get that back on your taxes to a percentage. There's ways and means to do it. But if you could get that audience, 2,000 people across an area,
and that sounds quite attainable, doesn't it?
It does sound attainable. Yeah, if you're quite humble in what you're looking for, if you're just looking for sustainability, then I think sustainability should be possible. But it does also require a big commitment. It's not something I can do at the moment because I've got other commitments elsewhere. I've got children to raise, and I can't be spending 5 nights a week driving around the country doing that.
No, but someone like Paul Smith, who is probably one of the most well-known comedians, or at least MCs, for Hot Water Comedy Club. Yeah. An incredible comedian. It's someone who just comes up with material on the fly all the time, constantly. The only reason why he got so known for Hot Water Comedy Club was mainly because he just wanted to create something that was local and didn't mean that he had to lug around all around the country, driving around, spending all that time. And what he's done is managed to make something local to him, and he's become one of the highest paying comedians in the I'd say genuine comedians in the country, not like these superstars, but and I think that's
that looks like Jason's going that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Big deal. Looks like Jason could find himself in that position, and fair play to the guy because he's put in the work. Ali, when she was running Commoners, probably could have found it if she carried on, but that was burning her out, and I can see why, knowing the ins and outs of that. But again, she probably could have found herself in that position, give it a few more years if she really, really devoted herself to it. But again, she's got family, she's got commitments elsewhere, so
this conversation's predominantly been about how great all the other people around are doing, and you got some really amazing material that you talk about, and your favorite bits that you do, and you've developed it. One of the best things about sort of being in the the Cambridge circuit and stuff, and seeing people regularly, is seeing how people's sets develop over time. I think Nessie most recently expanded her Granny Smith
thing,
and it's really good. It's got so much better over just in 3 or 4 months, and if you don't see them every time, and then you see them 3 months later, and they're like, oh wow, it's all changed. And you did your bit about I think it was an Amazon review, wasn't it, about a book?
Oh, that bit. So the Amazon review, which turns out to be a review of Mein Kampf.
Yeah.
Here's the secret to that. I wrote the whole thing, and it was never. I actually say that on the.
He's killed the punchline way before.
Fuck it, no. The only people who are going to listen to this are probably people who've already heard it. So,
that is so true. Yeah.
So I wrote this. I had this idea that you would talk favourably about something, then to reveal that it would be something quite horrible. What could that be? Well, it would be that. And I also needed something that would be a joke about the Nazis in some way, just so I could say, speaking about the Nazis, any Morrissey fans in. The only reason that exists is to go into the Morrissey material that follows it. And the only reason that Morrissey material exists is so I can take the piss out of the passage that won him the Bad Sex and Literature Award.
Yeah, okay.
Because that, again, I absolutely love. I love how bad that piece of writing is, and acting it out, and talking about wanking someone off on a roller coaster and rubbing the microphone on my face like it's meant to be a detachable breast. And there's a lot of stuff I really enjoy. So it only exists for that reason. But yeah, because I like the other bit so much, the Morrissey bit, I've really put the work into that that sort of fake letter, just to make sure that works really well, so people are on board with me for the next bit. Because the next bit, there's a section of it which is quite left-wing, although I don't see how calling someone who is vocally racist a racist left-wing, but apparently that's the time in which we live now. So again, I feel I need to buy a little bit of favour with the audience just to make sure that they're on my side and they know that I'm not talking about people who are just somewhat conservative. I'm talking about this individual who has clearly stated that when someone calls you racist, they're really saying, yeah, you have a point.
Okay,
which is a quote from him. Like,
wow.
Yeah, he doesn't see an issue with that. Like, he votes for, he's pledged support to For Britain, who are like a far-right anti-Islamic group. And yeah, so it's to buy favour, to go into that, to talk about that, to then talk about this other silly thing. And that thing's taken me probably about 6 months to get to this point, and it's not finished.
It's not finished?
It's not finished, no. There are lines that don't work consistently enough and need a lot of revision.
Yeah, so that's quite interesting, because with your material, yours is very much taking someone on a journey, like the whole substance of what you're doing, like give us over a 7-minute set, is really important, and some bits won't, like with particularly like storytellers, some bits won't work without other bits, you know. So there's an arc, and Morrissey is obviously that arc, and that's the thing that you come back to and call back to. But how hard is that when your sense in a room isn't quite sort of lively, and you know that your bit's kind of low energy and it needs to get there?
You can really feel the pressure sometimes, but I always come back to blaming myself for that. If the room isn't on board with me at a certain point, I very often feel it's because I haven't given them reason to be.
Okay.
So lately I've been trying to do a lot more for the initial few minutes, do a lot more audience interaction, get the people on board, try and talk about the night, something that's happened that night, certain audience members, if they've been quite prominent throughout the show, talk to them, get them involved. And then once they feel like they're your friend, then they'll allow you to talk about this stuff. And
okay.
Once they feel that kinship with you, because what you're talking about is potentially divisive. Again, it shouldn't be, really. I don't think morally, like, we should be saying that racism is a point that we should be discussing, but it's the context around it, and the fact that some people are a bit sensitive. Being in Cambridge is fine, but I've got to go and do a couple of slots in some more conservative leaning areas, and I'm interested to see quite how well that's going to go down, because I know it's funny. People have laughed at all the bits in all the right places, but when I go to someone who shares slightly different views, it'd be interesting to see quite how well they take it. Just
scout out like the fire exits and all that sort of stuff quickly.
But to be fair, I've done plenty of gigs in quite conservative areas, and I've always actually done all right, because some of the darker, more offensive jokes they're actually more likely to go for, and I've got some quite crude sexual stuff which again they love. It tends to be the liberal crowds who are a little bit more prudish, which is kind of at odds with the point of being liberal. Liberal means like sexually liberal, like you should be more open to the idea of these things, but apparently not. But yeah, like, so going over, but then I've spent a lot of time, I do spend a lot of time writing and going over individual lines and trying to tighten them up. And there's a book I got a little while back, which was it was designed. It's writing for TV, like late night TV shows in America. One of those writers has written quite a hefty book on joke craft and everything for those settings. Of course, it's meant to be a lot of clean comedy, sort of very uncontroversial. It was written prior to Trump, so what is now, it does not necessarily apply. But there's a lot of talk of craft, and I spend a lot of time like really thinking about that and working on it. And the idea of like A story, B story, like I really try to do like there's like trying to think without being too vague. Like every joke should have certain qualities to it.
Okay.
Like every joke needs to be clear. Every joke, like you've got to have the point in which you're making has to be apparent. You shouldn't have ambiguity in regards to the punchline, unless the punchline is meant to be ambiguous. But again, that's clear. Like it's clearly ambiguous. Like, so it has to be clear. It has to be concise. Like, so again, word economy is extremely important. And although some of my punchlines are quite wordy, I do make a concerted effort to try and put the funniest part at the end of the sentence, to have it in a way that if it's wordy, it's because it's naturally wordy to me.
I see.
It will come out of my mouth in that way if it was in a conventional setting. I've had, again, Chris has offered me some feedback on some jokes before, and he's cut it right down, and I've tried it, and because it's coming out of my mouth, it doesn't work.
For you, yeah.
I've got to have those little bits, those little words that add a sense of flavour, in the sense of like emotion, like it indicates the tone in which I'm saying it with, or my underlying feeling about it through gritted teeth.
I see.
There's just those little words of flavour that just make it funny, or add a bit more rhythm.
I see,
So the natural speaking rhythm, rather than clipping it short and feeling like there should be more to come. So yeah, there's a lot of time spent doing that. I listened to the episode with Chris.
Okay.
And he said, he made that martial arts analogy.
Yes, I remember that.
It's stand-up comedy is a lot like martial arts, and that resonated with me because for the longest time I've likened learning stand-up comedy to getting proficient at playing Street Fighter.
Great game.
I'm a huge fighting game fanatic. I love it. I don't tend to talk about it with other people because no one else gives a shit. But
it's the
same thing. When I go up on stage, I need to have my execution down pat. In the same way that if you're going to go into a match, you need to know your combos and your setups and everything. Yeah. You can't just come up with this on the fly. You need to know what you're pressing before you press it. In the same way that you need to know what you're saying before you say it. So I do a lot of rehearsing at home, and the times I always do badly are the times I haven't rehearsed.
I see.
And the times I haven't thought about a piece long enough. If I've just read something and written it and have it down on the paper, and then go out and say it without practicing it out loud at home, it's just theory. And I don't get the sense of it coming out of my mouth. Can my tongue even get around these syllables in the right way that makes it clear? It's clear on paper, because you're reading it, you're just looking at it. But to hear it, does my tongue and my accent actually fit with these words and make it clear and concise? Does it get a bit jumbled? Could it get jumbled? Do I need to rejig things? Is that word actually just something that would be funny in an American's accent?
I see, yeah.
You know, is it because I've just listened to a lot of American stuff lately that I'm using that, but actually out of my voice, with my accent, my delivery, it actually doesn't sound right, doesn't make sense? Or does it work because I'm saying something that I shouldn't be saying with this voice? But you don't know that until you're at home trying it and listening to it.
So you seem to have a real sense of kind of... I don't want to use the word censorship because pretty much everything you say is uncensored, but I mean, you filter everything that you do in the sense, before you go on stage, you have a very clear idea of
when it works.
When it works.
And I know every time I don't do that, not every time, sometimes I get lucky.
If you've been busy at home or something,
yeah, like school holidays, for example, like, you know, I've got stuff going on, or it's just been a busy week and I haven't had time. But when I can really focus on it, yeah, I feel it goes well. And I also feel that you should go up... The question shouldn't be, is this funny? The question should be, will they find this funny?
Yeah.
If it should be funny to you all the time. And I've made that mistake before, thinking, this is a topic I should talk about. I should talk about my son's disability. Well, why should I? It's not funny. Like, the story about him shitting all over me and, like, diarrhea and me travelling back, that's the joke.
Yes.
There's the idea of me wearing women's trousers on the train And then a girl sitting next to me at the penultimate stop where I was getting off wearing the exact same trousers. That's just funny. And the fact that she then thought she'd bought men's trousers. That's funny. The other stuff that precedes that, just the fact that I was there because it was a really sad time, like, I can't make that funny because it's not. Yeah. And it would be disingenuous of me to try. And there's other times where I've read something and thought, I could probably make this funny. But then I've tried, but because it wasn't funny to me and I thought, that's the sort of thing a comedian should be talking about.
I say, yeah. It's not genuine, it's not coming from your heart, it's not coming from... I mean, I know your comedy, as much as, you're very good friends with Chris and Walker, and he's a very good person for someone who tells stories and stuff to speak to, because obviously people who tell stories often need a little bit more honing and things like that, and people like Chris Norton Walker and there's a few others like Adele Cliff are helpful for that sort of...
With Chris, once the joke is done, it's done.
Yeah.
Once he has the one-liner...
And it works.
It works.
Yeah.
It works. And that's the beauty of it. That, of course, that comes with its own set of issues whereby you can't create quite so much momentum.
Yeah.
Because you have to come up with 1,000 one-liners that work.
I couldn't do that.
And then you have to hone them down into the ones that work together and group them. And that's a lot of what his show, the work that's going behind it. Writing jokes comes very, very easily to Chris. He can write jokes. He writes hundreds of jokes within a month. It's then taking them and collecting them together in the order that works. And there's a lot of editing. And then tweaking them for those that don't quite land in the way he would like. Of course, when you're telling a story, you have a narrative that you're attaching things to. So that narrative buys you some interest if it's set up right, if there's conflict in all the right places and it escalates. That adding the jokes to that, people are naturally interested in stories. We tell stories as that's just what we do as a society. Everything we talk about tends to be a story. Like, you've had a bad day, you tell the story of that.
Yeah.
We tell things in chronological order. Rarely do we tell things backwards or out of order for no apparent reason. It will be in order, so people are drawn to that. So it does buy you a little bit of favour. But then, of course, if there's a beat in the story that is essential, but you can't make it funny, it becomes a fucking problem. And you can just agonise over it. And I find myself doing that quite a bit.
Okay.
Certain beats that I know that has to be there to make this work, but I'm not quite sure where the humour lies in it.
I see,
and then those are the bits that
frustrating.
take a lot of editing. But also, tenacity is key. You have to keep plugging away. And if you quit too soon, again, you have to work at the outer limits of your capability. And doing that is working on those things that you're not quite sure like how to make that work.
It's quite a nice analogy that sort of is on topic with that. And it's like there's a story of this son and father and son who were digging for a treasure chest, like a pot of gold. They kept digging and they kept digging and kept digging and kept digging, and they never got to it, and they just kept digging and they fell short of it, and they said, look, we're giving up. And then another person comes along and just does that, the last couple more digs, and they get that pot of gold. It's like stopping short of where you could get to. And I think if you give up, and actually this is going to really lead on quite well to speaking about sort of new comics and people coming through and things like that, because people like a few comedians on the circuit that have just started out, where if you think about it, like if they stopped now, just as they started doing the first couple of gigs, then there's so much potential that they're losing out on, because we're all very different, we're all very unique, and your character and who you are and your persona and everything is what's unique about you. If you can hone that delivery of what you want to talk about and what's there, then that's as unique as it can ever get, because you are just you. And
I feel it's very important. Shall we talk about, like, because I can, if you want to put this in the vein of a new comic, I can tell you like what's happened with me when I started. I told you it was about the guy returning condoms, the first bit. So that, if you think about it, that's very similar to kind of the stuff I'm doing now. I saw something that interested me, it prompted a load of questions, and I wrote about it, and I had a few bits like that. Then my wife left, and it put me into quite a bleak place emotionally. But when I got back into stand-up, I had about 6 weeks off, and then I really needed just to get writing and do something. So I wrote about that, because in that moment, that was what I was thinking about and what concerned me, and there was some humorous stuff that came along with it. So I wrote that, ended up writing 15 minutes on that. going back to the Met Lounge in Peterborough, performing it, it went brilliantly. I was really, really happy, and it got me back into comedy, feeling very good about my ability to do things. Some of the stuff from that then carried over into like a type 5 that I was doing. And I gained a reputation for being a very dark, offensive comic. And it really just hinged on one joke, but there were a few more that was in a similar tone. But the joke was, I've got 2 children, my eldest who's 10 and severely disabled, and my youngest who's 3 and severely irritating. She's so irritating, she's the only child I know who's actually immune to paedophiles. Channel 4 wants to make a documentary about her and other children like her. The Unrapables, they were going to call it.
Fuck.
So it's those 3 lines basically got me this reputation as this really dark comic who will say anything and go to really fucked up places. People loved it. I actually had a request at Relevant a few weeks ago after going on and doing the Morrissey stuff. Someone comes up and goes, "Are you the guy with the paedophile joke?" So there's lots of guys with paedophile jokes. Yeah, but the one about your kid. It's like, yeah, that's me. And they actually paid me a tenner to go over to a table and do it. So I'm not going to turn that down. So it's still in the bank, but I'll still pull it out when I need to. Yeah. But so I had that, but then...
That's not a euphemism, by the way.
No. Hey. So I had a few other jokes like that. And then I felt that was what was expected of me, so that's what I should lean into. But as things got better in my life, like I'd met my girlfriend and stuff, that wasn't the person who I was anymore. I didn't have those feelings anymore. And writing that stuff was disingenuous. And I went and sought advice. I went down to London to have a meeting with someone who's a comedy director and paid sort of £100 just to sit and have a talk with him for a couple of hours. And it came across that, yeah, I shouldn't be doing this because this isn't who I am anymore. And I need to go away and find out who I am again and write that. So I spent a period of time then sort of just looking on internet for articles and stuff that interested me and then writing about that. And again, there were some things that I borrowed. I was doing a lot of MCing, so I always wanted to have new material every time I MC'd, which fucking killed MCing for me. Because just learning all that stuff with all the other things going on in my life and then trying to memorise them and go up and stumbling over my words, it was brutal. But it taught me to write jokes. To take a subject, to think of an angle, and to keep going, to edit it, to put the funniest words at the end, the words with the harshest syllables at the end, to condense it down, to make sure that the clarity between the setup and the punchline was there, that there was a proper twist in the punchline, that it took you in a different direction than you were expecting it to. And I very much like to do, like, you write a sentence that would kind of sound like a cliche in conversation, and then you just change the last word to something completely different. So you're going to imply that you're going to say something positive, you say something negative, or you imply you're going to say something negative, you say something positive. Normally do that about something that's horrendous. So it really sort of taught me to hone in. But again, I wasn't finding the things that really inspired me to write. And I don't like to talk about me when I'm up there.
I see.
I like to talk about things that we can relate to, things that are funny, things that we can satirise, things that we can... like mistakes other people have made, like bad art. Bad art is brilliant. I love bad art. Like I'm the sort of person who pretends to listen to Limp Bizkit ironically. Like Andrew WK is awful, yet I've spent 2 hours listening to him this morning. Like, he's got an album that starts off with music, 3 songs in, there's a self-help track. He just starts talking to you.
No way.
And it ends, like, it's talking about how, like, life can be very difficult and it puts all these obstacles in the way, and the goal of life is to overcome these obstacles and to relish in the opportunity to test yourself against these obstacles. And then he ends with the phrase, "That is what partying is all about," and goes into another fucking song.
I want to hear this.
It's nonsense. And then it happens like 4 times across the album. These deep-seated things, and then he just brings it back to partying. It's bollocks. And I love that. And that's the kind of thing I look for, and then it inspires me now.
Of contradiction.
Yeah, it just the fact that it's so fucking stupid, and that he's done it in earnest and just put it out there.
That's that element of, like, that is like narcissism. Like, I'm so important that you need to hear what my message is, and
like his whole thing is bizarre to me. Like, the fact that he is clearly a construct.
Yeah,
he came about as a project to create this rock star that everyone can appreciate, because it was around the time that Slipknot was huge and Marilyn Manson was huge, and rock and metal were considered very dark alternative subjects for people who were suicidal and depressed. And the last time rock was huge was in the 80s, when it was Motley Crue, Poison, and it was all about partying. So it was a case of, how do we bring the audience who have had that, the frat boy audience and the mainstream audience, back to this type of music, the people who don't want to talk about self-harm and children shooting up schools and things. So it was a construct. He went in, and then after about 2 albums, something happened on his website. Someone put a blog post basically saying that he was a fraud and that he owed all of his career to this Steve Mike, spelled Steev Mike.
Yeah.
Really weird. So and no one knows who Steve Mike really is. We don't know if it's one person or a group of people or a management thing. And then for about 5 years, he wasn't able to perform. He was able to perform as Andrew WK, which is his name, but it's also a brand.
Wow.
And he wasn't allowed to perform certain songs that were written by Steve Mike. So he had to go and do like hip-hop collaborations and classical piano pieces. And he became a motivational speaker and doing like spoken word shows until he's had this, that's all settled, and now he can write this album. And because he's been doing motivational speaking, he now puts that in his fucking albums. It's so weird just to have this idea of a man who is a man, and that is his name, and that is what he does, who can't be that because he's sold himself out so young. And I want to do something about that, but again, I'm not quite sure how to deliver that. The concept is so bizarre, and that's the sort of stuff that inspires me. But I've kind of learned that if I can't talk about these things passionately and excitedly, I shouldn't be writing comedy about it. And I think when you get into comedy, and this is kind of what I want to bring it around to, when you get into comedy, there's very much, you hear a lot of things and you see a lot of stuff and you want to emulate a lot of stuff. There's the people that you like and you want to kind of do what they do because that's the stuff that makes you laugh. That's why you're drawn to them. But you are not that person. You have not been going anywhere near as long as those people. So you lack the skill. So if you're trying to become a carbon copy of those people, you are going to fail. You can learn a lot by watching their stuff, listening to it, writing it down or getting manuscripts of it, learning about comic techniques and joke writing techniques in various books and things. If you just type in joke writing books, loads come up on Amazon. There's one which I think it's like, I can't even remember what it's fucking called. It's by Sally someone. That's really good. Like I said, the late night TV writing one's really good.
If I find it afterwards, I'll pop it in the show notes.
Yeah, do that. I can tell you later and you can put it in the show notes. There's another one by Jean Perrett, which is like a comedy writing self-taught course, and that comes with a workbook. That's really helpful. And if you can apply that to the people that you like and see what they're doing, and then when you're writing stuff, you'll go, oh, this technique would work here. But you have to find the things that you're really passionate about to write about. And if it's something that you're passionately angry about, like Louis C.K. was always talking about follow your anger, follow the things that really make you angry. Lots of other comments. Bill Hicks was brilliant for that.
Yeah.
But you have to be passionately angry about it. You can't think this is what people expect me to be angry about.
Yeah,
This is what people expect me to joke about. You have to have a feeling. If the only thing you're passionate about is, I don't know, orange pips, that is what you should write about.
But then that would be quite amusing, I think. Like, it's something as novel and simple as that.
Look at Noel Fielding. He's built a career on just surrealism and talking about things that no one would be interested in outside of his sort of perspective of that. Like, there's the word oblong. He's got a 5-minute routine about the word oblong and getting grown-up men to say the word oblong because you stop saying oblong when you become a grown-up. It's only a word you say as a child. Yeah, it's just a little thing that he's noticed. And again, he's built this huge routine about it. He's got another bit where he just talks about like whipping a mic cable. He had a really long mic cable one day and was just using it as a whip and a lasso and stuff. Again, because that's what in that moment he felt was funny and silly and wanted to talk about. Like, you have to have that. If you don't have that, first of all, you shouldn't be writing about that. You should go away and find the thing that you really feel is funny, is entertaining to you, that there is something humorous in it. And again, if you're just angry about it and you can't see the humour, again, maybe you shouldn't be talking about that.
And especially as a new comic, because the likelihood is, or at least some of the best advice out there is, it's really good to write new material all the time and try new material. However, when you first start out, just getting used to sort of talking out loud, basically, is really important. If you enjoy what you're talking about and you repeat it 30 times a week or a month or whatever,
Yeah.
You have to, you can't get bored of someone can continue doing it genuinely. Like it's gonna die.
There is
eventually.
a piece of received wisdom that I strongly disagree with, but I understand the logic behind.
Yeah.
And that is that you should spend, and this mostly comes from the circuit cities, so like London, New York, Toronto, where you just have 5 minutes at a time. And then you have to get that 5 minutes down to progress to the 10-minute spots. But then you only have 5 minutes of material, or possibly 2 5s of material that you can put together to make a 10. It's a very brutal, cutthroat way of doing it. And what they say is just focus on your 5 minutes. Get your 5 minutes as tight as possible, down pat as possible, so that you're just reading off the jokes. It's bang, 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 bang. I disagree with that.
Okay.
But it's because I had the luxury of going to open mics that gave you 15 minutes. Of course, these were mixed open mics with musicians and stuff. So it's not a comedy crowd even.
No,
but that's about as good as going to a club that is just open micers. Because when you're in a crowd full of open micers, they ain't fucking listening. They're just thinking about their own shit.
Yeah.
So these musicians aren't listening. They're thinking about their own shit. But if you can get them to listen, that's a good skill. You're already developing. But I had the luxury of writing longer. And that's why I organise Relevant, I do 10-minute spots. I don't like giving 5-minute spots. I think people should have 10 because it gives you room to talk to people. But to bring it back to the Street Fighter analogy, there's 2 ways to play competitive Street Fighter. And you start off playing what's considered a one-player game. That doesn't mean against the computer. That means when you're playing an opponent, the only thing you're thinking about is doing the things you've practiced, outside of what the other person is doing. That is the first step to just getting competent. So going up to the microphone and thinking about the things you've rehearsed is that. It's not optimal, but it is essential. So you have to understand that the first bit you're going to do is you're going to go up and you're going to talk into the mic and you're just going to be recalling things. And you'll be getting the feedback from the laughter or lack thereof. But just getting comfortable holding the mic, projecting your voice, stopping in the right places, doing all the things that you rehearse to the point where it's getting results is good. But when you get to that point, you then need to progress to the next bit, which, to take the Street Fighter analogy, is the 2-player game, where your focus is on what the other person is doing.
I see.
And then adapting what you have and your toolkit that you've built up with your character to defeat the other person. Now, in the context of comedy, it's not defeat, it's to make laugh. So you see who's responding and you comment on that and you bring them in and you be playful. And it's the give and take, but it's about what they're doing. And sometimes you'll have an idea, I'm going to do this set tonight. You look around the room, you see what other people are going for. You're like, that set won't work. But I've got this other set that will work. Or, none of my shit's going to work. I'm going to have to pull something out of my ass and have a bit of fun with these people. But you can't get to that point until you've spent that time just learning the basics. So when you start comedy and you see the people doing the crowd work, and they're doing really, really well, and you're like, I want to do that. You need to understand that you might fuck it up. You might shit the bed, and then you've got another 4 minutes of standing there.
We've all been there as well.
We've all been there. Yeah. You need to have the stuff, you need to have your material ready. And very often it pays to do some material, try a bit of crowd work, or notice a response and just comment on the response and see how you can comment on it. And if you don't do it well and you don't get a laugh, don't worry, because that situation will arise again and you will go home, you will be driving home and you will go, motherfucker, that's what I should have said. And you will get the opportunity to say it again if you do it enough.
Yeah.
And crowd work is a skill, but it's one of those weird skills where people haven't really broken down what you need to do.
Yeah.
But you'll learn it as you go along. But it also becomes a thing of comfort. And you also know, if that doesn't work, fuck it, I've got some good stuff coming up. But you can only get that if you've got that rehearsed down pat and you can't get flustered and you're not going, oh shit, what was I meant to say?
Yeah, and that comes with being comfortable on stage and speaking out loud and knowing that when there is that silence, that it's not the end of the world, or when you have bombed, it's not the end of the world. Because it is, the first time it happens to you is an awful, awful feeling.
It is. And it never gets better. That feeling will always be with you. But also, you need to lose in order to improve. You need to know where your shortcomings are to go away and work on them.
Yeah, exactly. Like, my first gig after like the long break that I had was incredible, and that was a music open mic night, like you said. And I did get the audience on board, and it was really amazing. But that wasn't helpful at all for me, because I went next time I did it in a comedy place. I bombed completely, and I did it exactly the same way. But I went up there with that arrogance. But the whole point of that set was not to be arrogant, but I went out there with that confidence, and you can see straight through it.
Yeah,
straight away.
Confidence isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you need to be able to back it up.
Yeah.
And having a run of gigs that get really good, and I've had enough now where I know that every time I have a run of gigs that are going good, that's just one gig closer to the one that's not going to.
Yeah.
Don't get cocky, because it's going to happen. I generally find the more humble I can be, the longer I can keep that streak going.
Yeah.
But inevitably...
Play it down in your head all the time.
Inevitably, I'll overestimate myself. I'll go up... I'll misjudge the situation. People won't quite be on side of me. I've got the material. There'll be the laughs. The laughs in the places that I know are tight and will work. And even if they don't, I know that they do. So that takes the sting out of it a bit.
Yeah.
But I always kind of feel like, fuck, I knew going into that this is what was going to happen. I shouldn't have done it.
And you still did it, yeah.
And I still did it. But again, there are times where you go, right, I'm going to try it. And you go, oh, fuck, that has probably only ever worked because I've done it in this way and I changed it today. I was over cocky, and the joke only works if you do it in this particular delivery style. Well, I know that now, and I wouldn't have known that if I didn't fail.
Yes.
And it didn't make me think about what I was doing. Because if it goes well, what is there to criticise? When it doesn't, it reframes it. And again, you have to lose and you have to work at the edges of your ability in order to grow. But working at the edges of your ability and losing all the time probably means you shouldn't be a comedian, actually.
Fatalist. For the listener, I have to say this. Like before I did this, arranged to meet up with Dan to do this thing, I said, I'm going to get you on the podcast, and I know you're pretty much going to finish with, I pretty much know you're going to put off all new comedians from doing comedy ever.
Let's just say, like, if you're doing it, you must have a reason to be doing it.
Yes.
You must be able to make people laugh outside of it, or at least make yourself laugh. You must have an interest for a reason. There are people who are capable of misjudging themselves quite severely, but those are, fortunately, in the minority. Most people who get into it, in the same way that most people who get into music at least enjoy listening to one musician, and they're able to play one song to a standard. It's a starting point. You need to build on it. But what I was about to say is working on the edges of your capability and failing is anxiety-inducing.
Yes, I see.
And it can seriously make you self-doubt yourself. And it can make you drive home and think, why the fuck am I doing this? Why did I come out tonight when I could have stayed at home and just filled tissue after tissue with cum and it would have been great?
Yeah,
but
I knew that was coming, but hey, there we go.
But the reason you're doing it is because it's fun. Comedy should always be fun. That's the point of it. Of course, like dead dad shows don't necessarily have to be that, but they're making the topic of dead dad fun and palatable for people. It should always be enjoyable at its core. And sometimes to make it enjoyable, you have to push yourself and go into some areas where you're uncomfortable and come back and learn new things. But again, to bring it back to Street Fighter, the reason you play that game is because it's a fucking game. It's fun. And people who get upset about a game and angry about a game, why are you playing it?
It has no bearing on your life.
It doesn't have any bearing on your life. Like, and you can take that into sports. If you're playing football and you're getting so fucking angry every week that the ref has made a certain decision or that your teammates aren't scoring a goal, why are you playing?
Yeah, I agree.
You can have fun. You should just go there to enjoy yourself. And if you're enjoying yourself, you're more likely to get something out of it. And yeah, if shit goes wrong, you'll go away and practice it, but you'll practice it with the intention of having fun. And so many new comedians, I feel like you can get disenfranchised. You can go to a gig and the audience can be completely oblivious to the fact comedy was even on that night. And it is brutal. No one wants to hear what you're saying. You get heckled. You can't come back to it very well because you're thrown and you're not in the right frame of mind. Those nights aren't fun, but you need to find the ones that are and go to them. Yes,
and the thing is though, just to briefly touch on that, when you do get a night like that where it doesn't work for anyone and it's an awful thing and you're getting nothing out of it at all, and
it didn't work for anyone. That ain't your fault.
That's fine, but I think going through those nights is actually really like fundamental in growth because even one, because it gives you confidence that it wasn't just you, but two, if that's the worst it's going to get.
Yeah, objectively. If that's the worst it's going to get objectively, like very few people are going to be in the situation that Jim Jeffries was in, where someone got up on stage and punched him in the face. Yeah. And even then, it was one guy punching him in the face one time.
Yeah.
Didn't dislodge a tooth or anything. He was all right.
Yeah.
Like, those things are so rare. Like, most of the time, it's fine.
Yeah.
It is fine, but it needs to be fun.
Yeah, that's the main point. And I think we're sort of getting towards the end of our time now, but I'm going to finish this off in a very sort of kind of typical comedy way and call back right to really early on in the conversation, where when you first started wanting to do comedy, the reason why you didn't start was because there wasn't the opportunities around you or in your close-knit community where you could go and perform. So you're a part of like a real nice collective in Cambridge where do have comedy nights that are great for new material, people to try new material or new acts and things like that. So tell us a bit about the nights you're running and things that you've got coming up.
Well, at the moment, I only run in the one night. So I used to run 3. It just got too much. One of the venues was non-communicative. Although they paid the best, they just didn't want to put the work in themselves. So I dropped that. And then Endurance I dropped, like I said, just out of financial necessity, but I may bring that back. So the only one I'm doing at the moment is the Relevant Records Comedy Night, which is the second Friday of every month. And that's become a really lovely venue.
It's amazing.
The open spots are 10 minutes. Like, it's not the perfect venue for comedy because it's too bright. Food is served throughout. There's this weird alley that runs down the middle of the tables, so it's not all gathered in front of you like your typical comedy audience. But for some reason, comedy works in that room.
Every time, despite the toilet being to the right hand side.
Every time. There are times it doesn't. But those are fortunately few and far between.
Yeah.
It's developed into a really nice, pleasant place. And I give everyone 10 minutes. Some acts I will do 5, but that's just because I've seen them really struggling. And I think 10 would actually be detrimental to them. And it tends to be after a few 5-minute spots, I'll give them a 10. Because they've got to the point where they've managed to get those 5, and they've got a few more bits they want to try, and they should be allowed to try.
That's more of a protective thing than anything.
It is, yeah. It's rarely do I do it to protect my own sort of like reputation. It's generally to. I mean, again, there are some acts who I'll take a bit of a sort of, oh fuck, this person's here. But again, there are some people who I've felt that about, and then have actually gone on to really come into their own. But it's normally to protect the act. If it's 5 minutes, it's just because they're so new. Yeah. 10 minutes would be damaging to them. But most people, by the time they hear about Relevant, are at a position where they can do 10 anyway. So yeah, I do that. I try that, and then we've got the Fringe, but the Fringe is by application. Yes, by necessity. We got 40 spots, and we had like 120 applications last year. Wow. But yeah, if anyone does want a spot, there's the Relevant Record Comedy Night page. It's just called the Relevant Record Comedy Night. You can message that. There's First Laughs, which I know is going through a transition at the moment, but we're doing everything we can to make sure that maintains. And of course, there's your night. There's Ben's night. There's a lot of entry level open mic stuff. Yeah. And Norwich is blowing up at the minute as well. There's a lot going on in Norwich that if it holds. Means that there's going to be 2 comedy scenes quite close to one another that will have quite a vibrant scene. So if you're willing to do the travel, so getting into the Cambridge Comedy Connection forum, if you're interested in spots, is vital. So there's a lot of good stuff, but you have to get out there, you have to put your name down, and you have to be willing to fail and be comfortable with that.
That's true. But please do, like, if you do join like the comedy collectives, and I will put the link in the episode notes for that, please do send any of us messages and ask for advice if you're just starting out, because like one of the things that I found in sort of the like, because I just abstained for many years from comedy, and coming back into it, you know, not knowing anyone in the sort of the local kind of comedy world, it was really helpful just to have just that sheer sort of selflessness that everyone seems to have.
Yeah, comedy can seem from the outside like a closed book. Yeah, like it's like a lockbox of stuff, and you don't know how to get in. The truth is, you get in by turning up at a comedy night. It's as simple as that. You turn up at a comedy night and you go and speak to the actor. You go, how do I do this? And they will tell you.
Yeah, literally, yeah.
And they will give you
name
all the
drop,
places.
Chris Walker.
Yeah. And if the comedian you speak to doesn't tell you, it's because that comedian is an asshole. And go and speak to one of the others on the night, because they will. And if they all tell you that they're not interested, it's because you're the asshole who's been heckling them all night.
Right, a process of elimination.
Yeah. But most are very, very helpful. And also, becoming good at comedy, the idea that you're born good at comedy is bollocks.
It is.
Because babies are not funny. I've had 2 of them. And I've met loads. They're not that funny. Like, it's a skill that you learn as you grow up. And it's a skill that you can learn, because doing comedy on stage is different to being funny with your mates. People like to say, if you're funny with your mates, apply what you're doing there with them, but you don't necessarily know what you're doing with that. And a lot of laughter in conversation, it's been studied, most laughter is agreeing with people in context. It's not actually because something funny has been said. It's polite laughter, it's encouraging laughter, it's just, haha, I'm glad I'm here together with you.
Yeah.
It's not because something legitimately funny has been said that could be taken onto stage and would look like a well-crafted joke. You need to learn craft. But again, speaking to people, they will point you in the direction of all the resources.
Yeah.
Because they are out there, and they are affordable, and they are understandable, and learning to do the stuff is attainable. If you put the work in and you're willing to fail, you have to take your ego out of it and be willing to fail.
Yeah. Great. Are there any other sort of messages you want to leave before we...
No, because I think anything beyond that, I will start to ruin people's expectations.
Yeah. Well, this has been an amazing episode, Dan, so thank you so much for joining me.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
No one else will, but I did. Cheers, mate. So that was Dan Farmer. What an awesome guy. Do you know what? It is safe to say that he is one of the nicest people I think I've ever met in and out of comedy. But during the episode, Dan spoke about a couple of great books that he recommends to any comedians or comedy writers. And I just wanted to let you know what they were. The Serious Guide to Joke Writing by Sally Holloway, Comedy Writing for Late Night TV by Joe Toplin, and Comedy Writing Self-Taught by Gene Perritz. All of the links to their websites are in the show notes. So if you do go on to buy one of those books, then why not mention the podcast? It does really help with us, and it's all about helping each other. But before you do that, don't forget Dan runs an amazing new act, new material night at Relevant Records on Mill Road, Cambridge, which is the second Friday every month. Like the page on Facebook, and if you are an act who wants to perform, send him a message. All the details of how you can like that page are in the show notes. And anything else discussed that is linkable, followable, likable, listable, and not limited to findable can be found in the show notes. And there are still tickets available for our live recording of the Comedian's Outlook on Monday the 30th of September at the Boathouse in Cambridge. My special guest for this episode is the awesome Rich Wilson, who is highly rated by so many names, including the huge names of Frank Skinner, Rob Beckett, Sarah Millican, and so many more. He is one of the best comedians in the country right now, and also hosts the amazing podcast Insane in the Membrane. Tickets are only £7, and there's going to be live stand-up comedy from myself, Mel Byron, and Rich Wilson, and then an exclusive interview for the podcast. So run over to the lukeanthonycomedy.co.uk/TCO live for ticket information. And don't forget, you can become a patron of the show and get exclusive content from the interviews, and it also gives you a discount to these live shows. And wherever you listen to the podcast, on your favourite podcast app, please rate, review, and rate it highly and share it with your friends. It really does help. But that's it from me. Have a great week, and I'll speak to you soon.